Judith Durham, welcome to the Australian Music Vault.
Wow.
So much to talk about. As Julie Andrews would say, let's start at the very, very beginning.
Oh, wow.
Can you remember when music first came into your life?
Well, my mother apparently said that I sang nursery rhymes in perfect tune when I was 2. Of course, being 2, I don't remember it. But really it was Dad with the piano. He had an old upright which was brilliant, and he played by ear, so I couldn't wait to get on the piano. Of course, we started with chopsticks, but then I started piano lessons and got really it was playing the piano that was the most inspiration, and the radio, just hearing songs that I loved and wanted to sing along with. So it was just magic for me, but I used to get frustrated because I wanted to do it better, the piano playing. I used to want to do it better. And for about, a whole year or something, I used to burst into tears because I couldn't do it. But singing, not a problem. Always could sing, loved it. Mm.
What were some of those songs that you remember hearing on the radio?
Well, we're 24 hours of sunshine. There are 24 hours of sunshine every day that you're in. I've lovely messages, you see. And forever and ever, just beautiful melodies. And Vera Lynn's voice inspired me. But just wanting to just do it. I mean, I just couldn't stop doing it, making that noise, as it were. But didn't learn singing as such. It was a piano that inspired me to learn until I was much older, and then I was going to officially learn.
Well, let's jump ahead to those years. So you did study piano at the concert?
Well, initially from private teachers at Mum and Dad. No, not at the con straight away.
Okay.
Mum and Dad had to scrimp and save to help me, so to learn anything, and they were very, very kind. But because I became so, good at it and got my MSA, so my diploma, in other words, so I learned from Ronald Farron Price, and that was just the biggest blessing, Yes, and I was in love with him as well.
Oh, were you now?
Yes, he knows that too.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, Ron Farron Price, that's a very, very legendary name.
Absolutely, Professor, of course. Yes, oh, absolutely. He was so inspiring. And, of course, I was learning on a grand piano, and that in itself was inspiring to actually have that experience. It was very magic, the whole thing magic. But I stopped in the end because I just didn't have the time to do both. And I'd started singing with jazz bands initially because I was going to learn opera and didn't because I got taken away by the idea of singing trad jazz. And so then I stopped doing the piano virtually because there just wasn't time in the day, making all my own clothes as well and all that, trying to just do everything.
And what was it about jazz that lured you?
Well, it was all the rage. It was all the rage. Everybody just loved trad jazz. It was the town halls used to be jam-packed and with the church dancers, or, of course, Ernie Sigley or whatever at the RSLs. And, it was a different, that's kind of, you could either be rock and roll or you could be trad jazz in those days until the Beatles came along, and then everything kind of changed.
But you were asked to sing with the Melbourne Uni Jazz Band?
Well, initially I had to pluck up the courage to ask a band, could I sing? I just couldn't wait to get up on a stage and sing. And so, the trombone player looked pretty friendly. Vin Thomas, his name was. And because he was so friendly, he said, oh, well, come back on a quieter night or something, But they were very, very welcoming, and it turned out to be brilliant, and I was offered a job. And so for a whole year I was singing with jazz bands and having a great time, and the place got packed out. And I sang at the My Music Bowl for the first time, actually, and got a standing ovation. It was amazing. Remember jazz concert in those days.
And what about Frank Traynor? He was a part of the scene.
Yeah, but Frank Traynor, he was like the best. I was so thrilled and honoured when I was going to sing with his band, and he had a different place to play. Great, 7-piece band, of course. He really wanted to inspire me to do better. In fact, he wrote the cover notes for my very first EP because I was lucky to record with what was W&G Records in those days. So I was given that opportunity for an EP, 4 tracks, as they say, and but the Seekers also, because I'd met up with, it's a bit of a long story, but I met Athol Guy a year later because I sang with a guy. Oh, it's so complicated.
Oh, hang on. Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment.
But it's sort of, they all cross over,
Of
you know.
course.
Yes, it's hard to isolate.
Of course.
Yes, yes.
What were the jazz songs that you were singing?
Oh, well, the first one I sang Weeping Willow Blues, Reckless Blues, which were real blues, and Basin Street Blues, I think, because I knew that. But I had to learn, like to specifically get up and sing with a band, I had to learn. And yes, Ken Farmer, who was a drummer, who I had a crush on, of course, but he lent me all his Bessie Smith records and things. And so that was how I got to know the repertoire. And so I thought, right, I only need 3 songs to be able to, I just thought, well, I'll learn 3 songs. So then one of the other musicians, they lent me there to do a chord book.
Yes.
So I could get up with a jazz band so that we had all the chords so that you could give the banjo player the chord book. And, you know, it was a real, this is how you do it in the trad jazz world, you see.
And you studied the music and the records of people like Bessie Smith,
yeah, just
Billie
played
Holiday.
them over and over. Yes, I didn't appreciate Billie Holiday quite the same. It's a slightly different era from Bessie Smith, of course, because Bessie was the real blues, and I found it very, very inspiring. But at the same time, I was very inspired by Maria Callas and still wanted to do opera.
Okay.
So it was all very a mishmash of, and Joan Baez came along, and so I thought, I like those songs too. So, and a lot of people like skiffle, you see, so skiffle music, and skiffle was on the radio as well. So it made a big, everything was crossing over and all the influences and, but Bessie Smith, I mean, obviously Queen of the Blues, and I tried to emulate her. That was really the voice that turned me on, if you like.
And people said that your voice was very strong, very distinctive. Can you remember what someone like Frank Trainer said about your voice?
Well, he wrote in the notes, he said how I'd have to quote it, because he wrote cover notes on the back of the EP.
Yes.
To say that I had the quality that blues singers twice my age would have normally, because I was only 19, I think it was at the time. Yeah, so, and when I went on, I did television. I did one IMT in Melbourne Tonight. I did one of those because a girl wrote into the paper and said, you've got to hear this girl, Judith Durham. And somebody came along and listened to me, and then I got on IMT.
With Graham Kennedy.
Yeah.
What do you remember of that?
Oh, well, it was a disaster, really.
Why?
I had a beehive hairstyle and I just didn't even look like me. I can picture it now. And Rosie Sturgis, who was in the back, she said, if that girl was black, she'd be doing really well or something. I remember that now.
And whose idea was the beehive?
I just thought it was the hip thing to do because everybody had beehives. It was so stupid. I mean, I didn't in those days. I didn't have long hair. I'm just trying to think, my hair was I didn't have a fringe even at that point. I mean, it varies over the years, but I think it was the picture on the EP cover as I'm at a microphone and my hair's taken to one side with no fringe. So, and I've got my school jumper, which was cut down because I didn't have any clothes, So I had Dad's, because I made everything, I cut down my old school jumper, put some fringe around the neck, which was like a braid. This was navy blue, and then the skirt was made out of Dad's old trousers. And I thought I was hip as anything, and that's what I turned up every week at the jazz club. So it worked fine, yes.
Brilliant.
I mean, I used to make everything.
Yes.
My sister and I both, we loved making our own clothes. And in those days, you didn't think because everybody made their own things. You couldn't afford to. Yeah.
Judith, let's move then from the jazz world to the Seekers. How did that happen?
The Seekers. Well, look, it's such a fairy tale. The last thing in the world that I would have thought of aspiring to was anything that required an image. So, in fact, I thought probably I'll just make records and not have to be photographed.
Yes.
Anyway, and I was working full-time at the Idea Hospital as secretary to a pathologist. Mum said I needed to get a job, paid more money, so I went along and did an interview for a job. Didn't have a clue what it was. Rolled up, 6th floor of J. Walter Thompson, and said, J. Walter Thompson, don't know what that is, but I'll go anyway. And the next, at the end of the weekend, the guy rang up and said, well, you've got the job. So I was secretary to the market research guy. And when I got chatting to the other girls in the typing pool, because I was a secretary, taking shorthand and everything, and they said, oh, there's another account manager in here. His name's Athol Guy. So because my sister had... this is so complicated, Brian. My sister had introduced me to Athol on the phone once because Beverly used to work on the Channel 9 desk.
Yes.
So we had a chat and he said, I'll come in and hear you sometime because I was singing a downbeat. And he never did come, but that's typical Athol, of course, as everybody knows. But then I rolled up in his office. I went in and said, hi, I'm Judith Durham. Oh, right. And he said, why don't you come along and sing with us tonight? I'm singing with Athol Guy with Bruce Woodley and Keith Potka.
Yes.
As we do, we work as a trio in the coffee lounge at Treble Clef.
In Toorak Road.
Yes. So that was that very night. It's so hard to get my own head around it.
And what did you sing?
I just joined in on any traditional tunes that I happen to know.
And what were they playing? So they were folk and
Yes.
you were singing jazz.
Well, no, because there's a crossover in... This is what's so hard to explain to people. You see, jazz crosses over into skiffle, Peter, Paul and Mary, of course,
Yes.
but Lonnie Donegan and the Kingston Trio and just all... And I just can't think of the names, but we all cross over into these different genres,
Yes.
which are acoustic-based things, acoustic roots. Like it's just so nothing sophisticated. It's just everybody knows down by the riverside. You just can sing along. And my sister and I, we used to sing them. We just did it and you just didn't think about it.
Do you remember the song that you sang with the Seekers, with the boys? And they were called the Seekers.
They were called the Seekers, yes. And little did I know that they were looking for a girl to join the group. But I didn't have a clue. I just rolled up and thought, this will be, interesting. And probably was in a school jumper at the same time,
Yeah, your homemade clothes.
I
Do you
reckon.
remember what you sang?
Well, we would have done several things because it was a whole evening of entertainment in the coffee lounge.
Yes.
Very small place, a little bistro, I suppose I could describe it. And we shared $12 between us or something. Well, it might have been, I
Down
really...
by the riverside.
Well, definitely that. And anything that I knew of Joan Byers's I could do.
Yes.
Little Moses, for instance, or my trials. And the boys had some great things. These bones are going to rise again. Oh, it's so hard to come to mind.
Yeah.
But they had and of course they were all great performers. I thought, gosh, what? I still didn't know they wanted a girl in the group.
So when did that happen?
I think they'd been looking for a girl. They wanted a girl in the group.
Yes. And when did they ask you?
They never did. I honestly don't think they ever did because we were supposed to go to England. And when Athol came and asked me would I like a trip to, at that time we thought we were going to Italy.
Yes.
And I thought, yeah, sounds all right. We were going for 12 weeks, one-class ship, and it was the Sitmar line and it was amazing. But Mum and Dad said, yes, I could go. And we seriously thought, we were coming back. We had our return tickets and we were going to get on, because we got on a cruise, really one-class cruise. But that's what we did. We were going to do that, come back, and then do the rest of what was supposed to be an all-round staying on the same boat cruise thing.
Yes.
Very basic, but great fun. But then fate had it. Athol and Keith, being very clever, they'd taken great photographs with the ship's photographer that we could send ahead. Our album that we'd made with W&G.
So you had recorded in Australia.
We'd recorded in our lunchtimes, that's right, and we'd recorded with W&G Records.
Had you done many shows as the Seekers?
Not really, because we did a few in Melbourne, because it was all had to be done as well as doing our daytime jobs. And then once we knew we were going overseas, we then went up to Brisbane, and that was basically my very first time literally away from mum and dad. And I seriously made clothes and stuff to get ready to, crikey, I'm going overseas. And so I've forgotten what your question, what did you say?
How many shows had you done as the Seekers?
Yeah, well, I suppose it was over not that long. I mean, we'd done stuff around Melbourne.
Yes.
Yes, and I'd gone to Rob's Drive-In, the restaurant with the boys, and then I'd go back to the jazz club. It was a pretty busy life. But no, it wasn't that long that we actually worked because we knew we were going.
Yes. So you built up a repertoire for the cruise ship.
Yes, and we were doing the gigs at the top end of the ship, sitting down, which was kind of folky stuff with, of course, the stand-up bass from Athol and the boys.
Yes.
And then we'd go down the other end of the ship for the dancing. And the boys had brashly said, oh, well, yeah, sure, we can play for dancing. So Bruce had a drum and Keith brought an electric guitar or something, and I think Athol brought an electric guitar. So we could play pretending, and I was on the piano. And I got all my sheet music out so I could play for barn dancers and whatever you did in those days.
Wow. Judith, what was the magic of the Seekers in those early days? There was the three boys and their voices, but then you added that extra something.
Look, all of us had something special. None of us, you would choose none of our voices. Otherwise, you'd pick the best tenor voices or harmony singing. It wasn't like that. It was all so organic. Athol's voice sounded entirely different from Bruce's and Keith. So different. So nobody could have possibly auditioned the group. It happened because fortune, God, whatever it meant, that was supposed to happen. And a lot of people have said, what is the sound of the Seekers? We were asked ourselves, well, we don't know. They just said, they call it the sound of the Seekers. It's a special harmony blend that our four voices, which may not be the best in the world, but it works. And it's a pop sound. That's what's so remarkable about it. So instead of us being a folk group, when we got to England and we met up with Tom Springfield, who became our producer, he was designing a song that could be played on the radio. And, of course, it was I'll Never Find Another You. And all of a sudden, the sound of the Seekers was what people were told it was. It's the sound of the Seekers. It's a blend. And
that song, and we will go back to the Fair Start, but let's keep going. I'll Never Find Another You, written by Tom Springfield. Am I right in saying that you were late for the recording?
Yes.
What happened there?
I slept in because I put my alarm on for 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
Thinking I've got to be up, got to wash my hair because we were told a photographer was going to come to we were at EMI Abbey Road.
Abbey Road?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, all our clothes. Beatles were downstairs recording and we were upstairs during the daytime hours. So we did a lot of our recordings there. So anyway, I was going to be beautiful. Well, I was very self-conscious about my looks, actually. But I thought, well, at least I'll wash my hair. Anyway, I slept in. First thing I knew was somebody was, the lady who used to come and do the sheets or whatever, she goes, well, I was upstairs in an attic. I mean, literally, I didn't even have a view of the street. I had a skylight.
Earl's Court.
Oh, classic, 5 floors up. And she came and hammered on my door saying, there's a phone call for you. Anyway, it was Eddie Jarrett saying, look, you're late. Everybody's waiting for you. Where are you? So he said, I'll pay for the packed taxi. Just come over. Well, I'd never had a taxi before. I couldn't afford it, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I rolled up. The boys had all put their parts down. It was the way that we did in those days. Even the Beatles photographer, Jeff, I can't think of his other name, who, not photographer,
Jeff
sound
Emmerich.
engineer.
Jeff Emmerich.
Yes, him. Yeah, we were talking about it, not when I last saw him.
Yeah.
And just how we did it. We all sort of stood in or stood back to get the blend right. I think the boys put their stringed instruments on, it recorded them.
Yes.
That was one, because we had the speakers coming out in the studio. You heard it from the foldback studio, because it was all so primitive. So we had to listen to the speaker. It's like the speaker's over there, but you mustn't have it too loud because you might hear it over the,
Yeah.
Anyway, they did all that, but they couldn't put their voices down till I'd turned up. I think this is right. Yes, and Tom was going to going to get the sound going and all that stuff. So they were literally waiting for me. And it was one take or whatever it was, thank goodness. There's a flat note in it.
Is
I'm
there?
so embarrassed about it, yes. I know, I'll never find another year. If everybody listens for it, there it is. I'll always remember it.
You left it in.
Oh, well, you couldn't take it out. In those days, there was no such thing as multi-tracking or anything. You
course.
either did the whole thing again or, yeah, so...
Judith, am I right in thinking that I'll Never Find Another You, written by Tom Springfield, was nearly rejected for the Seekers?
Sort of. I'd been to the dentist and I came back and Tom was on the phone and he played me the track over the phone, actually. What do you think of this? And I sort of like, it's nice sort of thing.
Yeah.
Couldn't possibly. I mean, I knew nothing about commercial anything, So in that way, my knowing what makes a pop song is the last opinion you would ask in the minute. I mean, bearing in mind I was going to go to opera. I've all sorts of music appeal to me. So I couldn't have possibly judged a pop song. So, yeah, I was really, and I'm still to this day, absolutely stunned that I'll Never Find Another You is so just heartfelt by millions of fans around the world. It is a most amazing song that touches people. And I marvel that my voice was the one that would be the vehicle.
Is it a great song to sing?
It's quite difficult for me.
Is it?
All the Seeker songs are quite difficult for me. Challenging, and especially as my voice got more mature, I wanted to try and keep that pop sound. So, yeah, I mean, I managed to, but they are challenging songs, and it's a legato, what they call legato singing, as I understand it, where you have to, these days pop singers don't really do it. They'll cut the note off or they'll come off the note quickly. They won't hold the note for its full length. Some do, a lot of beautiful singers do, but many of the people who are aspiring for pop music, they'll just do things or gymnastics or something, which is very impressive in itself. But it isn't what's required. If you're trying to sing I'll Never Find Another You, which is how it was done and people seem to love it, well, that's, I used to do it because that's what I'd heard good singers do in those days. It's so funny because that was my upbringing. And Vera Lynn, huge influence of mine. She absolutely was my idol, musically speaking. And, that's what she did. So I copied her and wanted to sound like her.
Did you ever meet Vera Lynn?
I have not. Yes, I met her years and years ago. In fact, I was lucky enough to speak to her only about not that long ago, actually, on her just after her 100th birthday. We spoke. It was thrilling, actually, to have the conversation. But way back, we were reminiscing that I did meet her at the Ivor Novello Awards when I'll Never Find Another You won the award, actually, the best song of that year. And I actually met her then. So it was a big thrill to actually meet her. But means even more now that I've talked to her and she's still living.
Yes.
What a legend,
Incredible.
Oh, and what an inspiration. And I hope people want to hear her voice and are influenced by it because it's magic.
Yes.
It gets into your soul. It's brilliant.
Judith, let's just go back. We need to get this date. In 1964, the Seekers set off for England on a Sitmar cruise.
Well, first of all, we went and did the Fiji Islands or something first.
Did you?
And then, yes, that was part of the deal, as it were, yes. But yes, Sitmar cruise, so all expenses paid because you didn't fly. It was too expensive in the plane. We were on a cruise for 5 weeks.
And you turned up in London and you stayed there, which is unusual because a lot of Australian bands would work here for months or years and then travel, but you went pretty early.
Well, this was very clever of the boys because they were in advertising and Athol had the connection with the Sitmar line. So we were very fortunate and they had that flair because they'd been on TV themselves as a group, long before I came along. So they sort of knew the ropes of TV and what was required kind of thing. So, so by the time we got to London, they'd already sent ahead to an agent who happened to be Eddie Jarrett, whose name might be familiar to you.
Yep.
our record and our last Kinney tape that was us being with Graham Kennedy hosting the show. So people could see and hear us before we got there to a certain extent, but not still I'll Never Find Another You track. Myra, I think, was the track we'd already recorded in Australia. Yes.
Many Boats in the Harbour.
Exactly. So that went ahead. That didn't become a hit single, but certainly that it was out on Oriole soon after we got there. But yeah, so it was like the way it was paved because Eddie Jarrett, he heard the track, saw the vision and thought he could book us. So we were booked. We had a gig booked when we arrived. We were on television that night, which was whatever, This Day Tonight or one of those evening slots.
Yes.
And we sang South Australia or one of those, I can't think which song it was now. So the TV audience saw us for the first time, just this newly arrived off the boat from Australia.
From Australia.
Yeah.
And then there was a show with Dusty Springfield.
That was a little 6 weeks, no, not even that, 2 weeks after that. So we did that TV show. We were booked up in Blackpool with Freddie and the Dreamers, and I think because it was all those variety bills in those days. And that evening, one of the people who was an opera singer, funnily enough, she was sick and they had to have somebody fill in. And Dusty was on that bill, and Tito Gobbi, the opera singer, and quite a huge variety of stuff. And Dusty was on that show. And the Seekers, last minute, Horry Dargy, in fact, was the one who was very instrumental. Yes, he was very instrumental in helping us get started. And he was the one who rang up, I'm pretty sure this is right, and said, look, tell the boys, get their instruments back off the train, literally, because we were going to be on the gig that night. Yeah. So much happened by chance. You said, well, you'd say chance, but it's just meant to be.
And Dusty Springfield's on the show. Her brother is Tom Springfield.
Yes.
He writes not only I'll Never Find Another You.
Hadn't yet written it yet, of course.
No, but he also wrote A World of Our Own.
Oh, yes.
And he co-wrote Georgie Girl.
Yes, and The Carnival is Over.
And The Carnival is over.
But at that stage, Dusty mentioned that she'd seen this group, The Seekers, and told Tom about it. And I believe Keith talked to Dusty about the fact that he wanted his guitar, wanted to buy his old guitar or something. I may be getting this wrong.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of sort of talk. And Eddie Jarrett, meanwhile, had asked Tom, could he write a song for us? Oh, it's so... And meanwhile, we were doing TV all the time.
Yes.
And me with my weight problem, I'd be thinking, oh, my God, how am I going to look slim on television? And they started making clothes for me, really, because I had to find 2 dresses for each of the programs every week because we were on TV all the time. So we were really well known by the viewing audience, but we still didn't have a record. And Eddie Jarrett realised that we needed a record, a radio identity.
A hit.
Yes, and this is where Tom came into it because he bless him, wrote that monumental song and it became a hit all around the world.
A huge hit.
Yeah, and then 2 more because, as you said, World of Our Own and The Carnival is Over. Won 3 in a row, all number ones, never been done before, so I understand.
And you're knocking off English bands like the Kinks,
Absolutely,
the Rolling Stones.
Yes, we gave.
You're in swinging London.
Yeah, the Beatles, unbelievable. We kept them off the top of the charts. We were a challenge for them.
Yes. Did you have any contact with those bands?
Well, look, we were close to them. I think Keith spoke to the Beatles at one point. I was rubbing shoulders with the Beatles when we were backstage at Wembley. Various ones, because we were all doing Top of the Pops together.
Yes.
So every week, if we had a hit in the charts, we'd be rolling up to Manchester to do the slot, because you can imagine we had a continual run of hits in the top 40, whatever, top 10, I suppose.
Top 10, top 40.
Yeah, I can't think however many it was on that show. And so we were always there. So we'd see all, the Bachelors and everybody, the Kinks. I remember having a chat with the Kinks backstage. He had a song for me to listen to. And, yeah, it's just, so much going on. And the boys met, a lot of people because I'd be a bit shy.
So would they take part in swinging London? Would they go to the clubs, the speakeasies?
I think they had a pretty full-on life, as you would if you were in that position.
But not you?
No, I was too shy. Yeah. No,
and when you say before a weight problem, it was a problem perhaps of you thinking that you had a problem?
Well, I had to squeeze into things. I was pretty... I mean, remember, I was making my own dresses, and a lot of that, the reason for that was so I could disguise that I needed neck-to-knee corsets and stuff to nip my waistline in. And, you know, I tried to disguise it the best way I could.
And were you looking at the other girls, the other singers, Dusty, Cilla Black, Petula?
Yes. Well, a lot of them too, you know. I mean, I've heard from later on that Dusty herself thought she had a weight problem.
Yeah.
I used to idolise the appearance of Dusty. But Cilla, of course, was renowned. She was really quite slim. Petula, very petite person. Sandy Shaw, absolutely. So I didn't realise in any way that I could compete physically at all. I thought, it must be that they like my singing. It never occurred to me that physically anybody would really, you know, think I looked all right, you know. Yeah.
Really?
So, really, seriously. So now I see it differently, and especially now larger-sized women are much appreciated now. You know, and if it's the confidence and everything. And, of course, I was confident when I sang.
Yes.
No question, that was not a problem at all. But, you know, in front of the cameras, I was so grateful that the people who were lighting me, you know, that I learned a lot about makeup, because the girls would spend ages and ages making it look like I had hollow indents in my cheeks.
Yeah.
And, you know, and one girl... she showed me how to, you know, do my hair, various things. And so I learned a lot, and they made special clothes sometimes for me and things like that. So I am indebted. That was a period of about 6 months prior to us having I'll Never Find Another You. Yeah. So I'd already had a lot of, because this was, you imagine, every week we were doing TV.
Yes.
2 shows, 2 songs every week. And here's this acoustic group again, the Seekers. And this time they're going to sing Well, 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 or, you know, Lady Mary or something. So it was remarkable how it all unfolded that we got. And I learned, they said, don't wear green on stage, because we were doing some of the theatrical shows, the theatrical, you know, and they said, whatever you do, don't wear green because it doesn't look good under the lights. Well, I wouldn't have had a clue, because they were complaining because I was wearing a different dress every night, and they didn't know what dress I was going to turn up in.
Dresses that you were making.
Many of them.
Often, and inspired by, am I right in thinking that you were inspired by the Queen?
Definitely. Oh, absolutely, because when I knew I was going to London, absolutely, I thought, well, this is the right thing. I never would have gone anywhere without high heels. And, of course, gloves, matching shoes, matching handbag, matching gloves. And I tried, I aspired. I thought, well, she's well-dressed. Mum approved of her and everything like that. So it wasn't until I got to London and discovered that London was supposedly swinging, then, I didn't know a clue. I didn't know about swinging London.
Did you swing?
No. I was too shy. No.
Oh.
My sister was there, though, and she
Beverly.
was... Beverly. Bless Beverly. Because she had already gone to London a year or so ahead of me, and it was the most amazing thing that there she was, living in Earl's Court, of course, 5 floors up. You know, I had the attic next to hers and her friend Anne, which was such a wonderful thing. And she showed me London, so... she took me into Phoenix and Bond Street and the places where she'd got to love. Yeah.
Judith, let's talk about Georgie Girl, a huge hit in 1966. You identified with the lyrics?
Oh, yeah, very much so. And, of course, Tom Springfield wrote it with Jim Dale, who's so remarkable as an actor as well. How on earth did he write those very insightful lyrics? Unbelievable. But what a hit song. And that it had the best production value, and it still does today. So it's very inspiring for young girls and all that sort of stuff. Now I've forgotten what the question was. It's just what I do.
I'm interested in how you identified with the lyrics.
The lyrics. Yes. Now...
shake off your downy feathers.
That's right. At first, I didn't identify with any lyrics. I was a great one on melodies, on whether they moved me. So it wasn't until a bit later on that I started to be inspired by the lyrics more so, because I've sung it through the years in my own solo shows as well as all the Seekers, and more I've come to be really appreciated and uplifted and by it. So it's a very modern, still today song. As you say, she had those dowdy how, if only I could have been inspired right then to do exactly that. But I didn't have the confidence to do it, you see.
Do you think the boys realised that your shyness?
No,
No?
I don't think so. I don't think anybody really, no. I think...
You didn't talk about it with them?
Not that I recall, no. They were terrifically helpful, friendly,
Yes.
wonderful people. But no, I was too... look, I was just introverted, and I thought I was the only person. You know, you always think you're the only person who's feeling what you're feeling. And it's only now I'm so much older, and of course there's a lot more talk about it. Now you'd talk about it, you'd tell people, but I used to keep it all to myself. Yeah, so I really, I think I unnecessarily caused myself sadness, you know. And of course, I've never been not really a depressed person, although at one stage when I got nervous exhaustion, I burst into tears. That was 1965. We'd had the first big year and came back.
Yep.
Yeah, so I did get nervous exhaustion and I had to not perform for a while. So then I suppose, you know, because I had to have a tranquilizer or something like that, I was only prescribed it for, 2 weeks, and then I wasn't meant to have it again, which I never ever did. But yes, I needed something to, sort of
Calm.
ground me. Yes.
And what about fame? Did that have a big impact on you?
I don't think I ever really felt famous. I think I'm starting to feel famous now. The fact that you're here today and I'm being put into this wonderful
Judith.
vault, I really mean it. I'm starting to feel famous, but other people tell me I'm famous.
But what about when you came back to Australia after your time in England with all those hits? There must have been wild scenes at airports.
Absolutely. Well, yes. I mean, Mum and Dad, but all the airport scenes, like when we first came back, which was after a year away, and we touched down, every single airport would be hero welcome.
Yes.
I remember particularly going to Brisbane and they were lining the cyclone fence, reaching out for us all, because you'd walk off the tarmac. It wasn't, it was very much down home. In Melbourne, of course, Essendon as it was in those days, for Mum and Dad to be there, and it was a real hero's welcome. So, yeah, I mean, all that, but it's still, when I know now that we were really competition for the Beatles, we were keeping them off the top of the charts.
Yeah.
There's no way in the world I ever thought that I was at that level. All I was still thinking about, oh, my God, what am I going to wear? That was always like, because I had to pack I didn't have any assistants, had to get up early, do my own hair, pack my clothes. I had to do it all. And now I think, well, at that level of stardom, you'd have help.
Yes.
And
you'd have Amalia in the background.
well, Malia is not. I mean, she's the most amazing person. But like an assistant for that job.
Of course.
I mean, Malia is amazing that she does so many things. She's not, your average person at all.
What about, were you aware of the fact that Australian artists back in Australia were possibly watching the Seekers and watching them knock the Stones and the Beatles and the Kinks off the charts?
Well, I know more about it now, and especially because of the blessing of the internet, which didn't happen then. People would write to us and I'd get a phone message and all that. But now we've got the benefit of this amazing tool at our disposal. So we've learned a lot more about ourselves now.
But at that time, you didn't really realise.
No. I remember very now distinctly, I had a letter from someone, an Aboriginal lady, and she said, we know that she loved the Seekers music, and, we used to dream of the time. We had our home on the rubbish heap. I mean, seriously. And we used to dream of the time when this land would be your land and this land would be our land. So I thought, oh, my God, an Aboriginal fan. We never met any Aboriginal people. It's just mind-boggling. Like when the Seekers played the My Music Bowl in that huge crowd we had, 1967, I mean, it's unthinkable that they hadn't done this. There was the vote. Like the Aboriginal people weren't even being... And the Seekers having all this adulation... And where are the Aboriginal people? I didn't know a single Aboriginal person.
Were you aware of that then?
No. Nobody, I don't think anybody thought of it. It's awful. It's awful. I'm just so ashamed now. But then the awareness just wasn't there. I remember when I was in school, which was down in Hobart at the time, and they said that the teacher said that the last Aboriginal person in Tasmania had died. And I thought, oh, that's good. I thought, well, that tidies that up. It's horrendous.
Yeah. Well, you've made up for it, though. You've been very active. It's wonderful.
Oh, look, I feel so blessed that still in my lifetime I've been shown that this can change.
Yes.
You know, and we've got to all be very, very sensitive about it. We've all got to be really put the Aboriginal people first. They were here first. Like, it's really important to think, well, how much they feel about this?
Of course.
That's what's still missing.
Yeah.
So I'm doing my best, and hopefully I live long enough to, still help.
Yes.
Yeah.
Judith, tell us about that incredible homecoming concert, 1967, the Myer Music Bowl, 200,000 people.
Absolutely astonishing. Of course, Hector Crawford's wonderful audience, because it was Music of the People for Moomba, actually.
Yes.
But nobody expected such a huge crowd. We'd already played it the year before, and 100,000 people turned up. But this was like 210,000 people. It was like for one person for everybody in Melbourne.
Yes, 1/10 of Melbourne's population.
That's right. And they've got an aerial shot of it, because Channel 7 was going to televise anyway.
Yes.
And so that was happening, and so they've got an early, like an 11 o'clock shot. But this still wasn't when the hugest crowd, which was later in the afternoon, where they were all the way down to St Kilda Road. So we were kind of not really prepared for it. I think we had about 7 songs prepared.
Right.
But people have been sitting there, all day, like from 6 o'clock in the morning or something in the heat, just thrilled to bits to be there, out over the hill, because in those days there was no barrier.
Fence.
That's right.
That's right.
So people didn't care that really, well, you weren't meant to be over the hill, but they all still were there and all the way down.
Do you remember your feeling when you walked out onto that stage?
Total awe, of course, awe. Very exciting. To be honest, I do remember that it was, because it was a very hot day, I do remember being worried about a dry mouth, but that didn't last long. But I do remember thinking about that, to keep my mouth moist. But it was just also unexpected, and we had the Navy band as well as the symphony orchestra.
Right.
So it was a lot of people on that stage. And we walked on. Of course, it was the old rock face as it used to be, and we sort of appeared around the end of the thing. But, and of course, I had the emerald green dress, which I'd brought out from Melbourne, from London. I knew I needed some clothes because I was going to be going on tour back in Australia, and I'd needed some clothes. So I was really lucky to be able to get that dress, which was in a shop in Knightsbridge, as I recall, off the peg, and it fitted me easily, and never dreaming it was going to become something of an iconic dress. Yes.
Taffeta?
I think it's taffeta. I'm not really 100% sure, but it looks a bit taffeta-ish.
Well, I think it's on display at the Australian
taffeta?
Music Vault, so people can make their own mind up.
Look, I'm thrilled that they see fit to put it on display. It's so nice because all my homegrown fashions, I didn't make that dress, of course, but everything's kind of, it had to come from somewhere. How did I find it? Wasn't it brilliant that it happened to be there in that shop? It fitted me. By then I'd lost enough weight that it fitted me, So many things have to fall into place for something like that.
Did you have an idea of the style that you were projecting?
Not really. No, it's been very helpful to discover that apparently I was projecting a style. Now, some of that was always to try and emphasise my narrowish midriff, like my rib cage is a bit narrow. So that style of dress at that time was lucky because it was what you'd call a princess style, I think. Not quite sure about that, but the narrow midriff. So it was a bit of shape without having a waistline nipped in like the earlier dresses had been.
But quite conservative.
Always conservative. I think you'd say demure almost. I once or twice I used a low neck, but I always felt a bit self-conscious.
And then later on, though, you more colourful, more floral dresses.
More floaty.
Yeah.
Yes, but nothing was ever really defined as such until later. In fact, there was a website not long ago. I can't think what it was called, but they said it was the Judith Durham look.
Right.
And they got a model to make,
Yeah.
and I thought, oh, I've got a look, you know. But for me, it was just that it was the fashion, obviously, at the time, and this narrow ribcage thing, sometimes a high neck, even though it didn't have the long sleeves.
Yes.
But some of it was just because I loved those styles, you know. And the hair to one side, of course, that in a way came of necessity. I found that easier to handle.
Easy.
Yes, and it just, things kind of evolved, and then I got known for it, and I think, I didn't realise I had a look, you know, so it's really nice to find it out.
And it was organic. So you do the big show in 67, but then eventually you feel like you need to leave the Seekers.
Yes, I mean, there was no contract with us, you know. It was always like, well, if any of us want to leave, this is what we all said
Had
to
it
each
been
other.
discussed over the years?
Yeah, from the time we realised we were a group, because I was going to stay in England. That was a big thing, to turn up our return tickets back to Australia and stay in England. And so at that time we all kind of said, oh, well, if any of us want to leave, we'll give 6 months' notice. But of course, you see the group, and still to this day, I honestly think the group would have become more and more successful.
Yep.
I don't see any reason for it to have stopped. Which is a huge blessing.
And yet you stopped it.
Well, yes, but you see, it's so hard to put your head back to it. In those days, if you got to the age of 24, by the time you were 25, you were an old maid. So if I hadn't got married, so I thought, if I'm ever going to find Mr. Right, I'm going to have to leave and do something different.
You didn't think it could happen within the confines
Of the group?
the band?
No, I had crushes on all three of the boys from time to time. From when I first met Keith and saw him in the back of he was at the St Kilda match. I never went to football, but on this occasion I did.
Yes.
There was Keith up the back. I looked at Keith I was 14, never dreaming I was going to meet him one day. And then, of course, I got a big crush on Bruce when we went to the treble clef, and I'd be looking at those beautiful blue eyes across the guitars in the treble clef, oh, you know, and he'd drive me home, and, you know, but, oh, you know, it was like, oh, but not, you know.
Yeah.
So, and then later on I got a crush on Athol. I remember he was but nothing was ever kind of spoken, anything like that. And little did I dream that I was going to meet my Mr. Right, Ron, one day. And I met John Ashby, who was the Seekers. I met John Ashby, and he became my boyfriend just prior to when how can I say? He became my boyfriend while I was in the Seekers at that point.
Yes.
But we spoke of marriage at one time, but it didn't really seem like it was going to. He was not faithful to me. I mean, he knows this too. And so I thought, no, my husband's going to be faithful to me. So anyway, that's what happened. And of course, it turned out I had to pluck up the courage because I needed a musical director. If I was going to go solo, this was a big thing. And so I gave him a 6 months' notice. We were in New Zealand at the time.
How did they react?
Well, I can't remember. I mean, it was depicted in the Georgie Girl musical as if they were upset, but I don't truly. Isn't it funny? I take their word for it. Absolutely. I wouldn't dream of doubting anything. But it's just that I don't remember that because I was not happy in the situation. I needed to make the change.
And you wanted to sing jazz?
No, all sorts of music.
Okay.
Oh, no.
It wasn't a musical differences situation.
Well, I loved all sorts of music.
Yeah.
I wanted to sing with orchestras and I wanted to do everything.
And you felt you couldn't do that with the Seekers?
Not a variety of music. It always had to be a specific kind of song with the Seekers. That was very difficult for us to find suitable vehicles for the three boys, in messages as well. That was quite a difficult task. And so, but to sing orchestras, and of course, it turned out in the end I was right. Well, I'd already started writing songs with David Riley. Even Colours of My Life we'd already written, even though I was still in the Seekers.
Yeah.
So I had more strings to my bow, that I wanted to do things before I would leave to get married and have children.
Of course.
Which is what I thought. So thinking, oh, well, you know, I'm going to be an old maid unless I meet, you know, do so. So, but because I was giving the 6 months notice, you know, that was a period of time.
You thought, I better find a musical director.
Yeah, well, it was Eddie Jarrett who said, you need don't forget you will need a musical director. I didn't dream I'd better have a musical director. So he said, why don't you try Ron Edgeworth, who had been the group, the Treble Tones. He used to be on the Variety Bills as well as on the Seekers, touring with the Seekers with his group, the Treble Tones, as well as earlier in the show, opening the show as a trio. So Ron and I got chatting backstage because I had the thrill of singing my solo. My one solo song was The Olive Tree, which Tom Springfield had written for me.
Yes.
And the boys used to sing their solo, I can't think, 10,000 Years Ago, or I can't think what they're called, Rattler, a couple of, that they do as a trio. So Ron and I would have a chat in the wings while the boys did their thing. And we'd, you know, oh, he's nice. You know, I sort of liked him. But I wasn't dreaming we were going to have a romance. Never dreamed in a million years it was going to develop into anything like that. I knew, and I asked him for his phone number because I thought he'd be, because Eddie had said you need a musical director.
Musical director.
So Ron came around, wouldn't eat the cake I'd baked for him, specially because it wasn't made with wholemeal flour and it had eggs. White flour. I didn't want to know about it. He was very, very principled and he was already a vegetarian.
Really?
So this was like a whole new ballgame of like this person. We hit it off very, very well in every respect.
And that was when there was a flicker of romance?
No. And it turns out both of us had resolved, no, this was going to be a professional relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. And so he committed, he sort of signed a contract with me or something for a minimum of two months working with me, during which time we would tour America, not tour America, I mean do the record in America, which was the Christmas album, and to come back to Australia to do the New Zealand tour. And then I toured Australia. So by then, Ron and I, we'd gone and stayed on a health farm together. You know, we toured and all that. And I did my television special, which was Judith Durham special, like big deal. And so we realised we had a lot in common and we realised we liked spiritual subjects very, very much.
An approach to the world.
Absolutely, so much to share. So it was a remarkable match. And then we started to fall in love. That would have been 2 months after he'd come out to Australia, but we had to admit to each other there was more to this. Because he had a girlfriend. I mean, that was also like, oh, my God, because he was going to stay in Australia. And that was, I mean, a big shock, you know, and for his brother too, because Patrick decided to stay in Australia too and he came out for our marriage.
Right.
You know, so it's amazing what Australia's done. But anyway... Ron and I were so matched and it was a match made in heaven, really, as we know.
And you had a wonderful life together.
Oh, bless him. He changed my life in so many ways. I love being with the Seekers. We still to this day, we're very, very good buddies and terrific, wonderful match in the way it is, and especially musically. But this was another whole dimension.
Yeah.
The other dimension of my life which was missing. You know, the spirituality, the environmental thing, health, everything, just so. And the sad thing is, of course, he got motor neurone disease. Who would have thought? That obviously, you know, was a huge shock.
So, Judith, you go back with the Seekers. There was a Seekers reunion in the 1990s.
Yes,
but
that was a Silver Jubilee, of course. Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
But this is a new Judith Durham. You're a person who's perhaps more developed spiritually. What effect did that have on the band?
I don't really think I've chatted about it with the band in that way. It was definitely a change. I mean, a lot of things happened at that time because, of course, very soon after that, Ron was diagnosed with MND. And, of course, the big adjustment for me was the fact that I was actually going back into a group situation.
Yeah.
That was very, very difficult. Emotional, actually, apart from the fact it was emotional to see the boys. But it was very... challenging because all of a sudden I wasn't my own person anymore. I had other people who were in my life, and we were now doing sound in a different way, because when I worked with them prior, it used to be an acoustic band with maybe a drummer. But here we had a huge sound system and lights and, and somebody on the side of the stage doing sound and lights. And it was a really big deal.
And how were those shows then?
Oh, it was all very successful, but it was just an entirely different experience.
Yeah. Do you feel like you performed differently?
Yeah, I had to. But it was a different experience because of the sound being different.
Yep.
See, because I was used to singing in an auditorium, sort of projecting. Oh, it's so different. And we were even checked out, did we want to use our earpieces?
Yeah.
Can't stand them. We tried them for a couple of...
Right.
Couldn't stand them. I don't know how people perform with them, because it's not like a real auditorium.
Yes.
So that's just me. But this is the way things are done now.
Yeah.
So it was good to have the opportunity to try out what would the Seekers be like in the 90s. And that's what it was like.
Very successful.
Very
what about
successful.
the fans?
They were mind blown. They were so thrilled.
Yes.
Yes. And then, of course, little did we know, I thought that was going to be the end of it at that time. And little did we dream that another 25 years would go by and we'd have the 50-year anniversary.
Remarkable.
It is.
Remarkable.
And, of course, then I was going to have a brain hemorrhage to sort of stymie everything. And, of course, we had our musical opening, being the Georgie Girl musical, and all of a sudden there's our life story on the stage.
How was that?
Oh, it was excellent. It was frustrating because I couldn't change things. I went, but it wasn't quite like that. Yes. That aspect of it was jolly hard and still is hard to bear. But the reality that people had put all this effort in, and this amazing singer who was sounding and looking better than me, with the Judith Durham hairstyle.
Yeah.
So I was having a chance to see how people perceived us and our place in the pop world, really. So that's been a lovely reason to stay alive longer, to sort of see, and even with the Music Vault opening, to see how the public, what part of what you've created helps to give the public a perception of where the Seekers and Judith Durham, where we fit. Yeah. It's been amazing.
It was wonderful to have you as part of the Rock Whiz show at the Music Bowl. And I can remember sitting next to Paul Kelly, and at one point we were in tears watching you rehearse The Carnival Is Over.
Gosh, what a privilege. That was so fantastic. I couldn't believe that was happening, and seeing people, as you say, people in tears, people in the audience in tears. You see, that's the dimension you don't, when you're being that person back then, you don't realise what something's going to mean to people another 50 years on. Yeah. So I'm so pleased we've shared that together, Brian. Really fantastic.
And that song, it's very powerful.
Oh, yes.
And I suppose music is powerful like that, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Oh, and the combination, the words and the music are so important. Yeah. That's really, I feel more and more, especially as my life's changed, where it was always just the music that I cared most about, how the lyrics become so much part of that whole experience for people as they go through life.
Of course. Let's just talk for a moment about young women entering the industry. Do you have any advice that you would give them?
Advice to young women? Well, you see, you need to be yourself. My strong belief is that if you can live the life you want to live, and that it's hard to say it, because there are so many influences now, and particularly because it's a real industry now.
Yes.
You've got to be so mindful that other people need to make money as well as yourself. Otherwise, you might as well give up and go home. So you've got to be so careful about what you do. Which song, are you going to sing? Because you could be known, as I am, you could be known by that song for the rest of your life, and you've got to live with it.
And categorised. Put in a box.
Absolutely. As somebody once said, a journalist said, crystallised by your own immaturity. This was by Don Moraes, I think his name was, and he said that because he was doing an interview on Twiggy in a very modern contemporary magazine. Twiggy was a new up-and-coming, and they were doing me being interviewed and Twiggy being interviewed.
Right.
Yes, this is so amazing when I think about it. So and you can see, I mean, Twiggy was one, I'm thinking, oh, gee, I'm not slim enough and all that. But I didn't even really know much about Twiggy. So I don't know quite why I've deviated into that. But
Well, also, I think there was a quote from you. You once said, why do people have to become sex symbols?
That's right. Yes. I feel sad for people who project that image, especially as it can't last forever. It's not something, and you look at me as a prime example. I was down on myself, very critical of myself, and have always been to a certain extent. But the longevity is what, I mean, if you've got a young image and you can't project that for the whole of your life, even somebody like a footballer, you can't keep that going. It's got to be, you've got to have something else to go on to. So to have the gift of music, the gift of being able to sing, making any sound at all, but as long as it's something you enjoy. See, I get frustrated with these programs where you're being judged and you get struck off.
Gonged off.
With all the talent in the world, but somebody's got to get knocked off. And I feel so sad because everything's got to be judged.
Yeah.
Instead of just giving the person, look at the chance I had to develop.
Yes.
Singing at the jazz clubs, just doing, everything, just never being crystallised in my own immaturity, as it were, except in the case of the group sound of the Seekers with the one song. So other than that, I had a chance to develop in all sorts of ways.
But also, you saying you were down on yourself, perhaps that gave you additional impetus and determination.
Absolutely.
And that's a big part of it.
Absolutely. I had my astrology sign once done, a chart, and it said tenacity of purpose. It was one of my qualities in the astrological.
Yes.
Absolutely. I so much believe in that. That's what, you've got to keep going. You just got to, that really is a key thing, I think. Very important. But not to let your looks be the means of that. That there's got to be something beyond that which gives you meaning in your own life, not just that you go, I wonder how I look, I hope I look good enough, because obviously that was part of me as well, which wasn't a good thing at all,
Do you feel that women are being more and more respected and encouraged? Do you feel like we've turned a corner?
Well, there's a lot more emphasis on the importance of women and having careers and reaching the glass ceiling and all that sort of thing.
Yes.
I think the emphasis is, yes, turning a corner, but we've still got that same, equal pay and all the things that are still controversial. There's a lot more talk about it. I never thought about the fact that I was a girl with 3 boys. I mean, when you think I dealt with that without realising that just to be able to do that, I used to be in tears sometimes. I do remember that because I'd be
Really?
self-conscious about something that had happened, or I couldn't win my point that I felt so strongly about something. But, no, the boys wouldn't agree, so I'd have to let it go.
And there were 3 of them.
Yeah, 3 of them.
And they were strong.
Strong men, and all very, very respectable, important men in their own field.
But also sensitive and intelligent. So
What amazing combination, yes, all of them. Wonderful, wonderful men. So for a girl to come along who knew her mind, even though was too shy to sort of express it, I'm a very opinionated person, I think, but often I can't express it.
Yes.
And I'd like to have a say. I like people to listen to just listen. No, let me say it.
Yeah.
That is very important to me, to be heard. As long as somebody's heard and understood the point, then I'm happy to set back, as long as they've taken that time to listen. Yeah, so that's really important.
Well, Judith Durham and what you stand for and what you have been is now preserved and will be heard in the Australian Music Vault.
Oh, isn't that a thrill? That's an astonishing statement. Thanks for just saying it like that, and especially from your ears, for your
My voice, your ears.
Yes. Yes.
And you think it is important that the vault exists to commemorate and to remember and to preserve?
That's extremely important, but what's missing, I'm just throwing this in, what people don't have a picture of is how did any of my memorabilia end up anywhere? It's been all around the world, all the places we've been talking about, on the balcony with mildew coming in when we lived in the bush in Queensland, mildew, moths, my wedding dress has got, I think it's rat's urine or something. It is astonishing how any of it has survived. So what they need to do is think, if somebody's got aspirations, they need to give some suggestions. What can you do with the things that might be treasured in case it becomes of value to somebody? Because otherwise it's just chance. How amazing. You can have a Judith Durham exhibit at all. You know, otherwise you'd have to sort of put all the photographs up and say, oh, well, that was what she used to wear. But you'd never actually witness going up to a showcase and there's that dress. So I don't know.
Green taffeta dress.
The green taffeta dress.
But
So
you did the work, and so you had the fame and you moved people.
Well, I had that, yes, but how do you hang on to it? See, the boys, I said to them, did you say? Ethel didn't even keep his double bass. Like, you know, they didn't keep any of their clothes. So, you know what I mean? It's like, well, what do you do with the stuff? You've got to downsize or you've got to move. And, of course, you just can't keep hanging on to stuff, you know, garages. And that's the problem, I think.
That's right.
Yeah, so thank God that the Music Vault even exists. How wonderful. So we're getting there, but that's got to be like for the people who are 20, well, you know, 5 years old now, if they have aspiring thing to think, well, I'm going to be photographed for this or whatever, wearing my dress, you know, we treasure the footage, don't we?
Of course. We treasure the memories and we thank you for all you've given us.
Gosh, my great, great pleasure and so thrilling to talk to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith.